point two, greatest common factor. Okay, the greatest common factor. We're going to talk about all this stuff with the greatest common factor. First, we're going to start with a word problem. Because that's our favorite thing always, yes.
That's funny.
A choir director wants to divide a choir into smaller groups. The choir has 24 sopranos, 60 altos, and 36 tenors. This is a massive choir. Each group will have the same number of each type of voice. So the sopranos, the altos, the tenors will all be broken down evenly, is what they're saying. What is the greatest number of groups that can be formed, and how many sopranos, altos, and tenors will be in each group? How can I figure out what the greatest number could be?
You would do all the things
Okay, all the factor trees for all of them? That's what you want to do? Okay, we could do that.
Or you could do factors.
Or we can find the factors. Okay, so in this one, we're not going to do factor tree because I don't want the prime numbers. I don't want the least. I want the greatest.
Science? No, math. What is wrong with
It
me?
is. The girls have it right, but let's figure out why. What they
Science.
say. So if I take 24,
Sounds
let's take 24. What are factors of 24?
3, 4,
1 and
6,
24. 2 and
12,
3
3 and 7, 8. No, 8. 4 and 8.
4
and 6. Not
and
5.
Not 5.
And that's it.
And that's it. Okay.
Yeah.
If I take 60,
Bro.
what are Jacob? Sit down now. What are the factors of 60? 1 and 60.
25.
2 and 30. 3 and 10. No, 3 and 20. 4 and
There is no
15.
4.
No.
6 and 10.
Yeah, 15.
6 and 10.
No, 4 and 15, right?
3 and
4 and 15. Yes,
80.
Jacob is right.
And then 5 and 12.
5 and 12.
5 and 12.
6.
Okay.
6 and 10.
6 and 10. And that's, is that all?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
And then we have to do the factors of
36.
So 1 and
1 and
36, 2
2 and 23.
23.
I meant 38. Yeah,
18.
no,
2
18.
and 18.
3 and 12.
3 and what?
Yeah,
Yeah,
12.
Oh, yeah, 12.
And
4 and 8.
4 and, no, not, oh, yeah.
4 and 8 and
4 and 8 is 32. That's wrong.
yeah, that's wrong.
4 and 9.
4 and
4
9.
and
4
9.
and 9, and then what?
6 and 6.
6 and 6.
6
Okay.
and 6.
What is the greatest common factor of all of those?
12.
Jason, stop watching
12,
Fortnite.
12. Okay, stop. So if I have 12 groups, okay, they want to know how many sopranos now are in each group. Stop. Stop.
No moment.
Control yourself.
Nobody's money.
Okay, what'd you say? How many sopranos are in each group?
3. Oh, wait, no.
No, look, we already did it.
But you got
We
3.
figured out that we're going to have 12 groups, right?
3.
What number goes with that 12 for sopranos? 2. So there's 2 sopranos in each group. So when you went ahead and factored, okay, when you went ahead and made these little factor charts, you've already figured out the second step of the question. How many altos?
5. Wait, what? Oh, yeah, 5.
Wait, oh. And
And
then
how
it's going to be 3.
Three.
Tenors.
Okay.
And I-
So you
Oh,
stop. So you actually figured out the answer to both questions at the same time.
Can I see? I see.
I like
Can I turn my computer?
12 groups of
minute.
2 sopranos, 5 altos, and 3 tenors.
Okay? Because when I make those factors, I can then match it up from there. Okay. Terms that you must know, because on your test and quiz, when they ask you this, you can't ask me, what does this mean?
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
We're not
Stop.
gonna test.
Hey, I need, stop. 8th graders, listen to me very closely. I need all the extra noises that your bodies are making or your mouths are making right now to stop and cease. And I need you to focus. What, Jacob?
When's the quiz?
It won't be till next week.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Common factor. A common factor is a whole number that is a factor of 2 or more non-zero whole numbers. So it is a factor that is a whole number. I do not have fractions in common factors.
Isn't that what we just found?
It is what we just found, common factors. Okay, the common factor. We specifically found the greatest common factor of that one. It was the greatest of the common factors. I hate that definition because it like defines what it says, which is stupid. Yeah.
There's no really reason for a definition.
So the greatest common factor is what we just found. We just found what is the greatest factor out of all of those combined. And the common factors is what we found individually. We found of 24, here's all the factors. Of 60, here's all the factors. Of 36, here's all the factors. Okay? The common factors would be anything they have in common. Like on 24, 60, and 36, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 12 are all common factors. The greatest common factor is 12 itself.
Wait, you said
Yes.
what?
On 24, 60, and 36, 1, 2, 3, 4 are all common factors in
Oh,
12.
that's what you meant.
But the greatest common factor is
Wow.
12.
I understand.
Yes, and 6. I didn't realize 6 because it was on the 24, was only on the 30. Okay. So, your common factors are what they all have in common, focus, and your greatest common factor is the largest of all of those that they have in common. Okay, so here we are going to find the greatest common factor. What is the greatest common factor of 12 and 30? Don't.
Are we gonna find all the factors? Or are we
Well,
going with the head?
It depends. Here's the deal. If you can tell me by looking at it, I'm okay with that.
3.
If
6.
not, we have to make a chart.
Oh, it's 6.
It's definitely.
6 goes into 12. Does 6 also go into 30?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So the greatest common factor is 6. Okay? Because I know 12 can be broken down into 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. I know 30 can be broken down into 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. Of number 2, 27, 45, and 90, what is my greatest common factor? 9. Okay? 27 can be broken down into 1 and 27, 3 and 9. That's all, right?
Yeah.
45 can be broken down into 1 and 45,
9 and 5.
9 and 5. 90 can be broken down into 1 and 90, 9 and 10, 2 and 45, 3 and 30.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's right.
But 9 is the greatest common factor. Then
That's
the
why I
last
put
term that you need to know for this section is relatively prime. Relatively prime. It's when the greatest common factor is 1. So when a number has a greatest common factor, when 2 numbers or 3 numbers or 4 numbers and their greatest common factor is 1, that's called relatively prime. It makes sense because prime numbers can only be multiplied by themselves in 1. Okay? So relatively prime, the greatest common factor is the number 1 itself. So it says find the greatest common factor, then tell if the numbers are relatively prime. What is the greatest common factor between 24 and 45? Well, 24 is 1 and 12, 2 and, or 1 and 24, 2 and 12.
It's 3.
Can 3 go into 24?
Yes, it's 8.
And what else? Can 4 go into 24?
Yeah.
And is that all?
Yeah.
Okay, 45 is 1 and 45. Can 3 go into 45?
Yes.
How many times?
15.
And then 5 goes into it.
15.
Is that all? So what is the greatest common factor of these?
3.
3. So my greatest common factor is 3. Okay? Is that a relatively prime?
No.
No, because it was not 1, so it's not relatively prime. Stop, Emmanuel. Okay? Not relatively prime. Okay, now look over here. What about 35? What does 35 break down into? 1 and 35 and
5 and 7.
5 and 7. What does 54 break down into? And 2 and
27.
9 and 6.
6 and 9. Okay. What else? Anything else? 6 and 9. 1 and 54, 2 and 27, 6 and 9. So what is the greatest common factor? And is that relatively prime? What? Yes, you can put RP. Okay. Now, we are going to do it with variables mixed in. This is where it gets tricky and you need to definitely pay attention.
Okay.
Finding the greatest common factor with variables. Okay, variables. Guys, stop talking right now. Focus. Finding the greatest common factor with variables. If I have 18xy squared and I have 28x squared y squared, okay, I've got to break these down. What are my factors of 18?
1 and 18, 9 and 2, 8 and what else? 6.
No, none.
3 and 6.
3 and 6.
Basically.
Anything else?
No.
Okay.
No,
And
it's
then I
not.
have
6 times
x,
3 is
and then
18,
I have
3
what?
times 6 is 18.
Times y times
Where'd you get that?
y.
It was an out of me.
8 and 6.
What are my factors of 28?
128.
4
2 and 12.
Well, no,
No,
4
2
and
and
6. Well, no.
14.
4 and 7.
4 and 7. Can 3 go into 28?
3.
Okay. And then I have,
24, that's wrong.
No, actually 3 and 8 is
24.
3 and 8 is
I was listening to her.
what is 3 and,
Ah!
and then I have that, right? X times y times y.
Yes.
Okay. Now I have to find the greatest common factor. So
Two.
look at the numbers. What is my greatest common factor?
2.
Okay. Look at the letters. What is my greatest common factor out of x and x times x?
Y.
Just x. And what about here? Y times y and y times y.
Y.
3 Y.
Y.
2 Y.
2 Y.
Stop. This is where it gets tricky.
It's 2 Y.
There are 2 and there are 2. So my
Why?
greatest common factor is 2
2.
in this case. It has a 2 with it. So here's how you would write this, okay? When you are writing your greatest common factor, you say 2xy squared. My greatest common factor. My largest number is 2. My largest x is,
X.
well, not my largest x. I only have 1x here, so that has to be the common factor there. And here I have 2, so I can keep the 2. Okay, 16x and 15x. I need to know the greatest common factor. What could it be?
4, 2.
You have
3.
1 and 16. You have 2 and 8. Does 3 go into
Definitely.
16?
No.
1.
And then you have 3 and 5.
It's 1.
It's 1 and it's
X.
x. It's 1 and it's x. So you have 1x as your greatest common factor.
So would we put RP or not?
Would you put what?
RP.
Wait.
Relatively
Um,
prime.
Yes, you would put relatively prime for this one, but it's not asking us that right now, so we don't have to do it. But yes, if you would be correct. Okay, so 1x is my greatest common there. What's my greatest common between 32y squared, 6x squared y?
6.
60.
32.
Oh, no.
No.
Yeah, this is 1 and 6. This is 2 and 3. 1 and 32. What else is on
36?
2 and what goes? How many times does 2 go into 32?
16.
16. Does 3 go into 32?
No.
Does 4?
Y'all did that at the same time.
Yes.
How
4
many
and 8.
times? 4 and 8. Okay. So what is my greatest common factor out of the
2.
numbers?
2.
Okay, 2. Now, here I have 2 y's. Here I have
2 Y's.
1. So it's 2
Oh.
y. Do I have any x's here?
Nope.
No. So can that be part of my greatest common
No.
factor?
Well, how did you get 2 again?
Because we did. We found out the
Josh,
factors.
I got 2 because I literally listed all the factors of 32 and all the factors of 6 and found which one was the greatest. Yes.
So if there's like a y squared or whatever, and then there's a regular y, does it just cancel out the square?
Right, you're gonna take the lower of the numbers because it's
Oh.
the same. It's the same as if I'm doing this right here, right? All of these are factors of these numbers, but I have to take only the greatest that's the same.
My tummy.
Okay, so here I'm taking the greatest of the same. So the greatest would be this side has 1, this side has 2. So 1's the greatest I can take out of both of those. This side has no x's, this has 2, so I can't even bring an x into the picture. Okay. Now, what about here? 7 is 1 and
It's 7.
7.
It's 7. 7 and it's 1 and 28, and then 2
2
and
14,
14, and then 4 and 7.
Okay, so it is
7.
good. So I have 7. Now, here I have an x, here I have an x, so what's my common factor?
X, Y.
And then I have y cubed and I have y squared. So it's y what? Yeah. So there's my greatest common factor.
Why is it
Oh, so you take the lowest.
Why is it
does
y
it
squared
take
instead
the
of y?
least-
Listen, when you come to variables, you have to take the lowest because that's what I'm doing with the numbers. I'm not taking the highest number from here, right? I'm taking the lowest that they have in common,
Yeah, but
right? The greatest common factor. The greatest common factor of here is this says x and then it says times y times y times y, right? This says x times y times y. If I don't have 3 y's over here, I can't put 3 down here. I can only put the largest amount that I have on the smallest side.
that makes no sense.
Okay? So that's how you're going to do it. That is what you are working on tonight on your homework, 4.2.
I'm gonna be so confused. Oh shit.
That's why you do
Like,
the-
ask questions.
That's why you ask questions.
That's why you ask your mom to do your homework.